Today's video is brought to you by Keeps, the subscription service that helps you keep your hair. More about them a bit later. Long ago, it was crossed by the Carthaginians in their wars against Rome. Centuries later, the Christians and the Muslims battled for control. And more recently, German U-boats crept through it, trying to evade Allied warships and sneak into the Mediterranean. We're of course talking about the Strait of Gibraltar, a relatively narrow waterway that separates the continents of Africa and Europe. Flanked on either side by the Pillars of Hercules, the strait has been a geographic landmark for as long as humans have been around it, and has been used by people for thousands of years to migrate between North Africa and the Iberian Peninsula. But all this traffic, for all of history, has been exclusively on the water, using boats, and still today the only way to cross the strait is one of the many ferries, unless you fancy a really long swim. Not a single crossing has ever been constructed to allow for people to cross on foot, despite the coasts only being separated by 9 kilometers or 14 miles at their closest point. However, there's been no shortage of ideas, and there's a chance one of them might be realized in the near future. So today we're going to take a look at the various plans to traverse the Strait of Gibraltar that could finally link these two separate worlds. If you're wondering what the allure is behind such an immensely complicated engineering product, the answer is, of course, money! A connection between Spain and Morocco would allow not only for cars and people to cross, but more importantly, semi-trucks and trains, with plenty of space for precious cargo. Africa is currently the European Union's 4th largest trading partner, behind only the US, China, and the UK. And the market has been steadily growing since 2009, with trade totaling 280 billion euros in 2019 alone. Historically, the bulk of this trade has been the transfer of raw materials, but in recent decades, the trend has been shifting to include textiles, electronics, and even cars. Currently, the main way these shipments move between the continents is through cargo ships and air freight. A train in Northwest Africa would allow for transportation to be both quicker and cheaper, the best of both worlds. This is even more promising when it's considered that many African nations are expected to grow rapidly in the coming decades, both as their populations boom and also foreign investment skyrockets. To build a railway and road across the Strait of Gibraltar and tap into this economic potential is either going to need a bridge or a tunnel. But as it turns out, neither are an easy option. So let's start with the issues facing a bridge. The Strait of Gibraltar is really deep, ranging from between 300 and 900 meters. That means that even the shortest of bridge supports would each need to be taller than the Empire State Building, and some would need to be 2 or 3 times as tall as that. For reference, the tallest bridge in the world, the Millau Viaduct in southern France, has a structural height of 336 meters, so we're already surpassing a world record here. And don't forget that this bridge has to be a minimum of 14 kilometers or 9 miles long at the very shortest, all without getting in the way of hundreds of cargo ships that would pass through underneath it every single day. Even if a bridge design meets all of these criteria, constructing it would be very difficult, as the strait is known for its intense currents. In fact, there are 2 currents here. Toward the surface, the water flows into the Mediterranean, while closer to the seabed, the water flows out into the Atlantic. This is due to the differences in salinity, and it could make the underwater phase of the construction all that more difficult. So, well, if a bridge is too tough, what about digging a tunnel? Well, digging underneath the bottom of the strait might seem like an easy way to avoid all of the issues that the water brings, and indeed similar projects have been successfully completed before, such as the Channel Tunnel connecting England and France. But the Strait of Gibraltar once again brings some problems to the table. The first of these is the depth that would be required, as it would need to be at least 900 meters deep, which is more than 3 times deeper than the world's current deepest subsea tunnel, which is found in the Ryfast system built in Norway. And even if you did manage to build this tunnel, you'd still need to ensure that it wouldn't be damaged in an earthquake, as it would cross between the African and the Eurasian tectonic plates across a fault line known as the Azores-Gibraltar Transform Fault, which is seismically active and could pose a serious problem to any such tunnel project. But still, despite all of these hurdles, there have been some pretty serious proposals to complete the crossing, and we'll start with one that, if completed, would be the largest engineering project in the history of the world. So have you ever noticed that some guys have all the luck when it comes to hair? No, never noticed that at all. I've got Oh wait, yes! Some people go bald, don't they? But look, Fear not, my follically challenged friends, because I've got the solution for you, and it is Keeps. Keeps is an online subscription service that helps men keep their hair. They offer clinically proven treatments to combat hair loss, which are delivered straight to your door. And the best part, treatment plans are affordable, typically half the cost of pharmacy prices. You might be thinking, Simon, you are bald. Why are you telling me about this? It didn't work for you. Oh, well, I left it too late, about 10 years too late. I wish Keeps had been around when I was younger, so I could have kept my glorious flowing mane. All treatment plans are recommended by a licensed medical provider, and you get a year of unlimited on-demand access to a dedicated medical provider. That means you can get expert advice whenever you need it. And here's the kicker. Most Keeps customers notice results within 6 months of starting treatment. So if you want to keep your hair, Keeps has got you covered. Plus, their all-natural thickening shampoo and conditioner system is award-winning for a reason. So what are you waiting for? Hair loss stops with Keeps. To get a special offer, go to keeps.com/megaprojects or click the link in the description below. That's keeps.com/megaprojects. And now, back to today's video. In the 1920s, a German architect named Hermann Sorgel was looking at the same part of the globe, but he had a very different idea. He called his plan Atlantropa, and its main focus was on damming the Strait of Gibraltar. Once this colossal dam had been constructed, he argued, not only would it produce an immense amount of hydroelectric power, likely enough to power most of the entirety of Europe, but it would also allow for the water level in the Mediterranean and Adriatic Sea to be dropped, potentially by 200 meters or more, creating tons of new habitable land for Europeans to settle. He saw this as a peaceful alternative to the concept of Lebensraum, one of Germany's rationales for invading its neighbors a few years later. It was a lot more than just that, though. He also believed that it was a great way to begin a renewed colonization period in Africa, and the name Atlantropa was his idea for the joining of Europe and Africa into one supercontinent. In his mind, the future world was comprised of 3 spheres: the Americas, Asia, and Atlantropa, which of course would one day be dominated by those of German ancestry. Huge irrigation canals would be dug into the Sahara so that the land could be used for mass agriculture. Huge man-made lakes would be created in Central Africa, and the Middle East would be converted into a sort of military border to protect against the Far East. Overall, the whole project would solve his perceived overpopulation of Europe, which he for some reason believed was the root of all war. It's pretty fantastical, but if you know anything about 1920s Germany, you know that this was the kind of thing that was right up their alley. However, for whatever reason, no one really liked his idea, probably because he estimated that it would take more than 75 years to complete and would drastically change the climate in totally unpredictable ways, such as affecting the West African monsoon. Bad times. Not to mention, imagine how upset everyone would be when they wake up one morning and their beautiful coastal town is no longer in sight of the sea. So, on the more realistic side of things, in the 1930s, Spain announced a formal investigation into the possibility of an undersea tunnel across the strait. And engineers even started digging on the Spanish side, but when they started reaching the deep sedimentary layers of hard clay, their tools could take them no further, and they were forced to give up. After ideas had floated around for a few more decades, the kings of Spain and Morocco in 1979 agreed to create a new government-funded committee to look at the project's feasibility. Nothing came of this for more than 30 years, until 2003, when both nations agreed to take yet another look at the tunnel, hoping to connect their railway systems. This time, they even went as far as to find an engineering firm for the project, the Swiss company Lombardy Engineering. This proposed tunnel would go from Punta Paloma to Tangiers, which you'll probably notice is not the closest point on the strait, but the water here isn't quite as deep, so even though the tunnel would end up being about 40 kilometers in length or about 25 miles, it would still be much more feasible than a shorter but ultra-deep tunnel that would be required somewhere else. The whole thing was estimated to cost about 5 billion euros in 2003, which is about 8 billion euros today. A hefty price tag, and perhaps one of the reasons this too fizzled out before anything came of the project. Several more proposals were presented to the EU over the years, but these ended up the same way that the previous ones had. During this time, a few ambitious individuals put up some ideas on their own, such as Eugene Sui, an American architect with some wild plans for the strait. Sui envisioned a floating bridge system connecting the 2 closest points. This bridge, which would be 24 lanes wide, would be comprised of many shorter sections, giving the whole thing an appearance somewhat reminiscent of the vertebrae in your spine. Some of the sections would even be submergible to allow for ships to pass overhead. At the center of the bridge would be an artificial island full of casinos, resorts, restaurants, you name it. The price tag for this one came out to a staggering $10 billion, but Sui and his team argued that this would pay for itself over the years with booming tourism, energy production, and trade, and they even created a detailed scale model to present to the Moroccan king. Another proposal was put forward by legendary structural engineer T.Y. Lin in the 1990s, which crosses the strait at the closest point using super deep piers and towers stretching 910 meters into the sky. It's about 3,000 feet. Lin's bridge would have been revolutionary, as the distance between these towers would have been twice as long as anything previously constructed. There have been many bridge proposals, but the difficulty of construction, the price tag, and tensions between the countries involved always seem to bring an end to the ideas. So, frustrated with decades of sitting around and getting absolutely nothing done, another player entered the scene: the United Kingdom. You see, Spain and Morocco aren't the only nations with a claim to the Strait of Gibraltar, as Gibraltar itself is a UK overseas territory, and Morocco is offered to be the UK's gate to Africa. So there is a chance that the United Kingdom might end up completing the coveted crossing. Although perhaps this was just a ploy to get Spain's attention, because soon after the UK started showing some interest, Spain once again asserted its support for a joint project with Morocco. Relations have improved between the nations in recent years, especially with Spain supporting Morocco's autonomy plan regarding the disputed region of Western Sahara. In February 2023, delegates from both countries met in Morocco's capital, Rabat, to discuss further plans about the tunnel that they've been shelving for 4 decades now, and the meeting saw the signing of no less than 19 bilateral cooperation agreements, with optimism from both parties. Currently, if everything goes to plan and the funding stays in place, construction is anticipated to start in 2030. If this is true, in a couple of decades, it may be possible to drive from Spain to Morocco underneath the Strait of Gibraltar. This crossing has the potential to catapult African trade with Europe and could be the beginning of a great revolution in relations between the two continents. Well, I mean, if it doesn't get cancelled again.